The Count of Monte Cristo. A chess game on a pirate ship being played by two masters, one with a vengeance. Alright, so The Count of Monte Cristo, originally published 1844 by author Alexandre Dumas. Also wrote The Three Musketeers. It is an adventure novel, historical fiction, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. No spoilers, by the way. No spoilers in this one. A classic book that I didn't really have any intention on reading and didn't know a whole heck of a lot about, but that kind of old-timey adventure thing didn't really appeal to me, but it was gifted to me because it was someone's favorite book, and they gave it to me as a present, and so I read it a couple years later, and I enjoyed it. It is very intricate. It's packed with plot. A lot of setup, execution, just dominoes. I will also note, this is an abridged version. Now, this is important for people who are really sticky on stuff like this, because people sometimes prefer an abridged version, sometimes they do not. Also, it's translated, right? And when it comes to books that are somewhat popular, then who it's translated by, which translation is better, is also a topic of debate. So this was translated and abridged by the same person, and yeah, there's a lot of people who also are pushing the unabridged version. They're like, oh, no. You need the unabridged version translated by this person, so-and-so, whatever, right? But this is the copy that I got. This is the copy that I read. I enjoyed it. However, there are some things that I will be critical of to a degree that might have to do with the translation and abridgment and not so much the author's story or how they told the story or whatever, and I don't know because I cannot read French and therefore have not read the OG book itself. But anyway, keep that in mind. It's consistently engaging, very charming, and it's pretty satisfying for the most part. There's a lot of vengeance in this book, and a lot of follow-through, so that's good. It's just a good yarn. It's a really good adventure story. Again, we're talking about 1844 is when it was written, so quite a while ago. And I mentioned like old-timey, and I guess that's not really that's not the image I want to conjure up here. I don't know what that century or like what that decade or whatever that era of time. I don't know what phrase to give it, but old-timey is not the phrase I want to give to that. Anyway, the pacing is pretty fast. And again, in this very specific abridged version, so this is the Bantam Classic, which is, I believe, under Random House. It says that this edition was the Bantam edition published in 56 originally, and then the classic one in 81, and then the reissue in 2003. Translation was originally 1956, at least by their translator, right, that they used. Anyway, specifics you might not care about, or maybe you really care about, but this is what my edition looks like. So again, translated and abridged by Lowell Blair. Let's get a close-up there for Lowell. I don't know how to pronounce that name. Anyway, yeah, a true adventure story. But again, pacing is very fast. I think part of that has to do with the fact that it is abridged. I mean, this version alone is like 530 pages, and it at times seemed a little long. It's weird to say that it's dry because just so much happens in this thing, but the language sometimes it's just so plain, and I think that part of that was to try and make it shorter. Not a lot of flowery descriptions or extended metaphors or whatever, right? So they do that in order to make it read quicker and have less of a word count and thus less pages and faster to read. But I'm curious as to what the unabridged version and the most true translation and unabridged version I could get. I wonder what that edition would be like. If you go on Goodreads, people, I really like the reviews on Goodreads. I find them very valuable, more than other places. And there's some people who have very specific, again, opinions about you should read this version because this person translated it and whatever, and it's unabridged. So, who's this book for? I think that it is for folks who really love a great adventure story. Again, we're talking about historical here. I would not say that it's an important book. I don't think it challenged me as an individual and really made me reevaluate myself. But it was a good yarn. Like, it's a really good story. A lot of stuff happens, and it's very satisfying, I believe. And it's just, yeah, it's entertainment. It's really good entertainment. It is a good book. It is a great book. Let's just say it's a great book. But yeah, again, you're talking about historical fiction here, adventure stuff. A man out to seek revengeance upon those who have wronged him. And just so much happens. Oh my goodness, just so much happens. But it's a really great story. It's a super good story. It is very high on my shelf. It's not quite top shelf for me. I wonder, though, if I got the unabridged version or the right translation or whatever, or even just a different abridgment. I don't even know if that's a word, abridgment, but the right type of abridged edition, I wonder if that would make me feel different. I wonder if I would like it better. But I don't know if I'd read this book again, just because I've got so many books to read, and it's really rare I read any book a second time. But it's a great story. It's a fantastic story, and I think that, yeah, it's worth a read. It's worth a read if this, if that century, if that decade, if that era of time appeals to you, and that type of adventure story, it's a good one. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. Sometimes classics miss for me personally. This one does not disappoint. It just became a thing about language and diction. Sometimes I found it incredibly plain and thus a little dry from time to time. But this is a longer book. Again, the translation, and it is an abridged version here. It might have played a role in that. But anyway, The Count of Monte Cristo, I think it's a good story. And if you're into that type of historical fiction, adventure from that era, I think you'll dig it.